Hello, this is Tom Nickel, speaking with you again from San Francisco. This is the second episode, I guess. I don't know if I'll end up rewriting history and this will stay the second episode, but for right now, it's the second episode of what I was considering back in the first episode as a podcast about the project I'm about to go and take off on a long flight to Cambodia and do. But I thought about it some since that first podcast that I recorded, about a week ago maybe. And I realized there's, I guess I would say, a bigger context of the project, which is, for me anyway, where I am in the life cycle, which is to say I'm in the early years after not working for somebody anymore. I'm purposely avoided saying the retirement word because that, kind of suggests that what you do with your time and energy after you're no longer working in some traditional employment mode is to step back, retire. And that is not what I'm doing. I'm doing some of that, and I know I'll be doing more as time goes by, but at the moment I'm really actively engaged in stuff, some of which I've wanted to do for a long time. Now's my big chance to do it, so I am. That's where the Cambodia project fits in. I'm really excited about it. About a year ago, I was traveling in Cambodia with a really old friend from college, one of my really longest-term great best friends, and he has quite a past history with Cambodia. I didn't. And, we had a fantastic time there together. There was a lot of reconnecting and kind of reaffirming the time and the stuff that he had done there for my friend Al. And for me, I just discovered a place and an organization, Cambodian Living Arts, which is the arts organization that years after the time that my friend Al put in back in the 90s and around the early 2000s in Cambodia, has now matured into a cultural restoration organization that's world-class. They perform all over the world. They perform every night at the National Museum in Phnom Penh. They're who I'm working with, kind of investigating in some informal way how they might be able to use some kinds of new media, VR, 360 videos, to extend their message. But the reason that I'm now sort of taking off in this second podcast is to put that project into the perspective of, here I am completing my third year, my junior year of after work. That's what I'm now kind of thinking of that period of time, this period of time as being after work. When you're working, after work is, after 5 o'clock, the time that's finally your time. But there is an after traditional employment, after work in a bigger sense, and I'm there now. I know it will have distinct phases. It won't always be the way it is right now, but right now, this is what I'm doing. This phase, which for me is, I guess I would call it the earliest after work phase, has a number of characteristics, and one of them, the one that I'm focusing on here, has to do with the fact that I still have energy, physical stamina. I have just enough fiscal resources, some skills that are still worthwhile, can be helpful to somebody. So I want to apply them and help some people, and in that, I guess it gets used an awful lot, but there's a reason for it. Make a difference. I feel like I have a chance to do that in Cambodia, a place that really needs it. So that's what this is about. But that whole kind of fulfilling some bucket list, personal, make a difference things that I'd like to do, that's only part of this phase. And if I left it at this, you'd be seeing the projects and the excitement that are traveling to Cambodia, but I wouldn't be, sharing it the way it's really going down. So I just made a kind of a rough off the top of my head list of what I consider to be some of the really big aspects of, what I'm considering for myself the earliest phase of after work. And I'm just going to look at the list and kind of introduce each one, make a few points about each one, and I think that's what this podcast is going to be about. As I was writing out this kind of rough list of, I guess I'm still calling it aspects of this phase. The first one I put down was the one that is what primarily, is the way to be understanding this Cambodia project, which is, feeling full of energy, having some wisdom and savvy, having the time and resources available to do something that, in my own terms, is meaningful and worth doing. But that's just one. Kind of just running in parallel to that whole thread is the fact that for me and for a lot of people who come to this point, my body's starting to break down, very clearly. Not only are some of the diseases and infirmities associated with older age appearing for me. I have cancer. I've had chemo. I've had, old guy surgical procedures like prostate surgery for an enlarged prostate. But I'm also learning, and anybody who, I guess, opens their mind up and tries to reflect on the experience can also learn that at this stage, probably at every stage, but at this stage when we should really be able to see it, the medical profession isn't telling us the whole truth about things. We have presenting symptoms. They have things that we can do, quite often drugs, that will alleviate those primary presenting conditions, but they can have other effects. People with high blood pressure can take high blood pressure drugs, but then it makes their joints get inflamed. And there's 100 things like that. That's what I mean by not telling the whole truth. Oh, the blood pressure's, come down. So I found that to be the case somewhat with cancer. There were, many aspects of the post-chemo process, during chemo process that I wasn't prepared for. No one had told me. Maybe if they had, I don't know how much you can be prepared anyway. But also in the more recent issues I've had with the enlarged prostate, there were many elements of the surgery and the recovery from the surgery and the long-term consequences of the surgery that were not really clearly laid out at all and should have been. And I think that's not only the body breaking down part, but the not getting the whole truth when you're trying to figure out what to do about it part is something to not be surprised about anymore. First time, yeah. Now, I guess you got to take that into account. Got to know that there's a high likelihood that's going to happen, and it's up to me to take that into account. The third one I wrote down here, I don't know whether to put it, in the good news or bad news department. I've taken it as good news so far. What I wrote down was mortality salience, a more functional awareness that end of life is not only real but approaching. Cancer will do that. Turning 65 will do that. Having peers die will do that. All those things, the cumulative effect of many of the things that happen inside and outside in this after-work phase. Again, for anybody who is open enough to hear the message is mortality salience. And what salient means is, the real meaning is revealed, the real meaning of mortality, that the time that we have here is precious. It's up to each of us to figure out what's the way that we most want to spend that precious commodity and do it as much as we can when we have the chance to do it, because there really is an end to it. It feels like I'm dwelling on the difficult aspects, and I guess there probably are more difficult aspects than there are, really simple, awesome aspects, although there certainly are some of the latter. But another thing that happens, and it's kind of funny because, for me and other people I know, not everybody, but a lot of people I know, when we're feeling still not at the peak of our game, but with a lot of resources left, as I've said before, some savvy, some wisdom to bring to bear on situations, you can also feel invisible, disregarded, irrelevant. Those are all strong. I don't mean that the people around me or around other wiser elders disregard them or treat them invisibly 100% of the time or 100% in any given moment. But that is part of the experience. There's times when you'd think that people would ask you something or pay more attention to you or notice you, ask for your opinion, and it doesn't happen. Part of younger people's perspective on older people is that, perhaps they have greater experience, but that greater experience isn't always relevant with the, incredibly even accelerating pace of change that we've experienced in the 20th and now into the 21st centuries. There's truth to that, but still, that feeling of sometimes when you don't think it should be, being treated as somewhat irrelevant and invisible. That's another part of it. I wrote down, and maybe this is more the case for me, I mean, I don't think that everybody does get the feeling that they still want to try to make a difference. And there's no reason that someone should have to. It's not engraved on golden tablets that's something that all people need to do. For me, I feel that it's part of what I want to do in order to have a sense of completion when I do come to the end, to have really, well, again, it's a value that I have, and so it's important when I look at myself that I try to live that value. But another dimension to it, 'cause I've already talked about that, but another dimension to it is why. What does that mean? Is that still some real ego-driven need to see myself, me, Tom, as personally responsible for doing something, so that not that I even want the external adulation for it, but even, is there something unnecessarily ego involved about wanting the internal adulation? I don't know. All I'm saying is, what is it that makes me the separate me that, I think at some metaphysical level might even be a delusion, to get that feeling that it was me, Tom, that made a difference? I think there's more to work on that one. I'm going to leave it there for now, because that's as far as I've been able to take it. Something to think about, something to notice. Economics touches everything, touches every dimension I've talked about, touches every dimension that there is, and many that I'm not going to talk about, because the kinds of freedoms that people have to do what they want to do with their time, that definition of after work, has to do with economic needs. Even when you're working, and after work just means after 5 o'clock, some people, their economic needs means that they got to work a second job. So they never get to that after work time when they can do what they want. Certainly an increasing percentage, I don't know about increasing, I shouldn't talk about the historical context. There's plenty of people in the baby boom generation who's hitting exactly the phase that I'm talking about right now, that won't have an after work, because their economic situation will require that they keep finding income to supplement Social Security or whatever else they have. And as long as you've got to devote some of your time, you have to try to make some more money, then you're still working. It's not after work. That gets complicated emotionally. What do people who don't get a chance for an after work think about the people who are having that opportunity? And then what kind of guilt does someone who's like me, who's having a pretty fulfilling after work, do I have to feel? The fact that I am having an after work isn't entirely attributable to me. Nothing is entirely attributable to one individual. And in my case, I've had the luck of family and birth and other factors, perhaps more than most. And that's why I am economically viable enough to have an after work. So there's a whole emotional, why me, what about others? It's part of it. There's generational issues. And these, I don't know how much, but a lot of those generational issues also have economic foundations, which is that, in the current system, current workers who are contributing to Social Security are needed to support the workers who are no longer contributing to the Social Security system and are no longer working, the ex-workers, I should have said. And the baby boom was a demographic blip. The workforce now doesn't have the same current worker to after-work person that is optimal. We've been hearing about this threat to Social Security for a long time. There's conservative forces, certain financial economic interests in this country that would also like to be able to, okay, I'll just come right out and say it, loot that pile of Social Security money that, people who are no longer working supposedly are entitled to, because it's in some sense their money, or at least part of a fund that they've been contributing to throughout all their working years. I'm one of those people. So the after work economic needs of a generation who has high expectations for how they're going to be able to live, and also has saddled the existing generation with considerable levels of debt to create such a burden on the current working generation that there's going to be tensions, and there are already tensions, and it's only going to get more significant. That pretty much finishes up that list of, I guess, just remarks and further considerations I wanted to make on this whole idea of after work. And so that's where I'm going to leave episode 2 of this podcast. It is a Friday evening. I'll be leaving for Cambodia on Monday. So I have a weekend to finish packing up things, to get my thoughts straight, to do some preparation while I'm here for things that I want to complete the production on when I'm there. And we'll see. Maybe I'll have one last podcast in me to focus kind of more on what I'm just about to be doing in Cambodia rather than this really bigger picture of after work. But that is the frame that I'm experiencing the Cambodia project, so it's the frame that I wanted to put it in for this podcast. So thanks for listening if you've stayed with me this far. I hope that you'll stay tuned for more, maybe one more here originating from the San Francisco Bay Area before I leave, but then maybe daily or as frequent as I can possibly do it, reports from Phnom Penh on how the project there is unfolding, how I'm experiencing it subjectively. I hope to mix things up a lot more once I get there too, not just be, Tom at the mic, but be able to use the recording equipment that I'll be taking to, kind of insert, interview things and statements and little conversations that I have with my friends and colleagues and people that I work with there, and that should make it a lot more interesting listening for all of you. So thanks again. Stay tuned for more. Signing off from San Francisco. Bye for now.